Jim Brando, who is with us on this show quite a bit, and we do appreciate his access, his love of college football as well. And he released his top 10. We're going to show you the graphic in a moment. He joins us now on Sic'Em 365 Radio and 365 Sports. In fact, you teased this with us, I believe, Tim, the last time you were on.
If I didn't learn how to cross-promote and advance promote my brand as well as any other brands that I'm on, then I didn't learn well, did I?
No.
Good to be back with Smoke.
No.
Things going well.
Yeah, they're going really, really well. And, of course, you know, every time we talk to you, something else has changed in college football. But let's get to your top 10. And you had kind of said something about Baylor. I did not know where you would put Baylor. And, of course, we have fan bases from all over the country. But, man, you have them very high.
Yeah, and I have a few other teams, I think, in my top 10 that a number of people would not see there. North Carolina State, I've got at 7. I think Clemson is not ready for prime time. Texas A&M fans are really pissed at me, but they've been pissed at me before. They're overrated this year. They're going to have a really hard time, even with the great talent that Jimbo's assembled. And I think the expectations are way too high in College Station. I don't even have them in my 6 teams that I list just outside the top 10. But I think North Carolina State is one of those clubs out of the ACC that everybody overlooks, and I think they can go into Clemson and win. I just do. And Clemson's a team that I think will get a little better, but I don't think that they are just, you mark them in just as you would Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia as being, top 4 teams almost regularly. It's gotten so predictable with those teams, and Clemson over the last half dozen years has been that other team, and I just don't think that they're there just yet. And I always love to have a fly in the ointment from the group of 5, and although this team will be in the Big 12 next year, I think Houston is that team. They've got a break in the American Conference this year that they don't have to play in their crossover games, either UCF or Cincinnati, and I think that's going to help them within their league stay undefeated, and I think they can go into Texas Tech Week 3 and win in what will be a Big 12 game next year, but is a game that is outside the Big 12 this season because they're still in the American. And I think that they can navigate themselves to 10. I want fans to understand this, and part of the reason for the confusion, I think, is most of the preseason polls, just about everywhere you go, it's all based on hype, recruiting, and returning starters. And I don't do it that way. My preseason top 10 is not a starting grid for the start of the college football season like every other poll in America. Mine is a prediction of the finish. This is the way I think it will look after the season is over and we are to the college football playoff, meaning I believe Baylor will win the Big 12, and I believe that they will be in the college football playoff. This is what that's about. It's about being where you're going to finish, not being where you deserve to start. I think that the polls have served as that for the brand names for many, many years. And Texas is almost always overrated as a result. So is Texas A&M, usually. And the same would have been true, I think, this year for all the hype surrounding USC. USC is not going to beat Utah. I saw that play out myself at the Coliseum a year ago. Now, I know they've made a coaching change, and I know they've got great talent, and Lincoln Riley did a remarkable job in the transfer portal, and he brought Caleb Williams over with him to be his quarterback. But, the recruiting ratings don't necessarily make it tantamount for your success in a given year. And that's what oftentimes happens with preseason polls, other than mine. You don't have to be a brand name to be in my preseason top 10, and you don't have to be a brand name to be just outside the top 10. By example, I think Kentucky is a team that could likely be the 3rd best team in the SEC. No one talks about them. They're really, really good. If you're looking for a team after Georgia And Alabama, that might be the third best team. Kentucky might be that team this year. And Ole Miss is another team that people just don't see winning 10 games in back-to-back years, and I think the potential for that is there as well.
Tim, what do you see about Baylor that makes you think that they have that staying power to the end of the year and being in the college football playoff specifically?
Well, first off, Dave Aranda, that's part of it. Okay, you got a hell of a coach, number one. I think his staff is outstanding. And I think in terms of the defense having proven that it can win, whether you've got 5 returning starters or 7 returning starters or 9 returning starters, they play position football just exactly the way his teams did at Wisconsin and the national championship that LSU got in 19, which was a team that evolved over the course of the season. They had to play a lot of snaps that year because LSU was just lighting up the scoreboard, and they had to play a lot more plays. But they got exponentially better by the time they got into the postseason. That's what Dave Aranda's teams do. The other thing I like are the returning players on offense to go along with the new starting quarterback. I think Blake Shapen is the real deal. I think what happened in the Big 12 title game will only carry over for him. And when I look at other players that are out there that are projected to start up front, and also their defensive front on the other side of the ball is really strong. So you add all of that together, and again, I look at schedule. All right, the big problem for them, I think their biggest hurdle is going to be week 2 at BYU. That may be their toughest game. That's a tough team that they're going to be playing, a very mature team, and at a place that is very difficult to get road victories. But after that, if you look at the conference, where they have to go on the road, I think they're good enough and can go in and beat Oklahoma at Oklahoma. Gosh, they had a really rough outing back, I want to say it was in the 2019 season, and were struggling at quarterback, had issues, and Spencer Tillman and I were there, and they played Oklahoma off their feet into the fourth quarter. Their defense stymied a really incredible Oklahoma offense all evening long. And that was with a bad Baylor team. I mean, it really was not a very good team at that time. You look ahead to what they did a year ago and to have had a record-breaking 12-win season, finishing it off even after the upset loss at TCU. I think that team really grew mentally after that. And again, I look at where they have to go on the road in the league and then who they have coming to them in the league, and I rather like it. Best time to play at Texas is at the end of the year. The Horn season will probably have gone upside down on them by that time, and I like the fact that Baylor gets them at the end of the year. Oklahoma's always tough, but BYU, I think, early is the real stumbling block if there is one. Can they afford to lose a game and be in the top 4? Absolutely. They would have been in had they just lost one game last year. Okay, the loss at TCU is what kept Baylor out of the Final Four a year ago. So you were that close then, and I think you have a better quarterback now than you had then. So, yeah, that's the reason that I like Baylor to finish in the 4-hole at the end of the regular season this year.
Well, that would be a lot of fun. I tell you what, we would love to see that happen. That would be a fun ride. But, Tim, you do have Oklahoma right there at 6. I think it's a very interesting year for the Big 12. And obviously they've got changeover, and I don't really know what to think of Oklahoma because I think there's a quiet confidence, and there's also a little pushback on the fact that it might take Venables a little while to get off the ground and running. Clearly you don't think it's going to take that long having him at 6. What do you like about Venables and the Sooners? Well, he knows the territory. He knows the landscape. And, again, it's not like they don't have top-tier talent. They do. Oklahoma's talent level is historically going to be better than Baylor's. But Baylor now has a head start in terms of its staff and what we've seen happen in the 3 years since. Plus, when you look at what Dave was inheriting when Rule left,
it was in a better spot. They just had those injury issues that I talked about at, when I last saw them play in Norman in that road game a couple of years back. The reality is Oklahoma's almost always going to have better personnel. But, again, they play so many big games, so many high-wire games, that during the course of the year, people don't think about that in the preseason. They don't think about how much exposure and how much pressure certain teams have to deal with on a week-in, week-out basis. And by the time the matchup with Oklahoma takes place, we're talking into November. They've already played a lot of huge games that were a part of a lot of attention through the course of the season. Baylor's not like that. Baylor's a team that it may be picked by the media in the Big 12 to win the conference this year. But is there a lot of national love and limelight on Baylor? Think about this, fellas. How much conversation about Baylor preseason do you really hear and see outside of your locale and maybe within the Big 12? Not much.
No.
Not much. It's like a difference in being in the top 30 of the PGA Tour during the Tour Championship and then being Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods, you see every bad shot. Okay, teams like Oklahoma are like Tiger Woods. If he's having a bad day, doesn't matter, you're still going to see him. Baylor can kind of lay low, be a little bit under the radar, not play with as much pressure on their program as a team like Oklahoma does. The tendency now in our profession, in the media, is to talk about only the brand names. Hell, you can do a 3-hour pregame show, and ESPN does, and teams like Baylor never get mentioned until they're playing either Oklahoma or Texas. Okay? That's not the case if you're the brand. If you're Bama, if you're Ohio State, if you're Georgia, if you're Clemson, if you're Oklahoma, if you're Texas, and even when Texas is coming off a bad season, you're still expected to win 9 or 10 games. Sarkisian is playing in a fishbowl unlike any other, okay? And to open with Alabama doesn't make it any easier for them. So, he's going to be picking up probably a team emotionally distraught after week 2. Those are the types of things that can get you in trouble. And I believe that Baylor, because of its veteran leadership, can go on the road, beat BYU, and yeah, it's going to be a tough out. But once they win that game, they will be on the radar. But I don't think people are going to be scoffing too much about that game with Baylor. It's not as if they go in with a lot of pressure to win. If they happen to lose it, they lose it. That doesn't mean that against that schedule, if you can go through the Big 12 and win them all, and I think they can, they'll still be okay.
Tim, I think the most interesting part of your top 10 is at number 7, NC State, because you look around the country, the hot team to pick to rebound to the ACC is Miami because of Mario Cristobal and the fact that they're maybe finally starting to put resources into that program after 20 years. But NC State and Dave Doran have been building this for a few seasons now, haven't they?
Absolutely, they have. And Doran's a great coach. Most people don't even know who the coach at North Carolina State is. And they should, because Doran is a guy that had just done a remarkable job at Northern Illinois. If you consider the job that he had taken and done there before he went to the Wolfpack. And yeah, again, under the radar, even in the triangle, fellas, he's in the shadow of Mac Brown. So there's not any conversation really about NC State. And again, I look at their schedule: East Carolina, Charleston Southern, then Texas Tech in week 3. These are all games under the radar that most people won't pay attention to, but I guarantee you they'll go into that game at Clemson 4-0 and very confident. And if Clemson overlooks them because they have another big game coming up after that, see, that's the thing another thing people don't look at. My old friend Bino Cook used to say, it's all about the material and the schedule. And it is. You got to look at the schedules when you take a look at projecting where certain teams are coming in. All right? Clemson will be coming off a game at Wake Forest. Not an easy game. Wake Forest, as you know, quite good. Clawson's done a remarkable job. They go to Boston College after that. North Carolina State is right in the middle of that game at Death Valley. And I think that's a really good spot for North Carolina State to be in going into that game. So I think they have an excellent shot of beating them. And that's the other team that I think most people don't know very much about. Utah, there's no excuse now. You know, Utah played their butts off against Ohio State, had a chance to beat them in the Rose Bowl. It was the first ever Rose Bowl they'd ever been in. Kyle Whittingham's been at Utah forever, and he's got bulletin board material already on what the pundits are saying about USC. He'll have that team really ready to go, and I believe the Utes will take care of the Trojans with ease. So, again, if it looks like these are reaches because they aren't quote-unquote brands, okay, if you want to say that, go ahead. I'll take that heat. But I guarantee you talk to football people, real football people will tell you that North Carolina State, Utah, and Baylor belong in anyone's preseason top 10.
Tim, did you hear the quote or see the quote where Nick Saban mentioned that they were rebuilding last year?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did. And I tweeted about it yesterday, much to the chagrin of a few Alabama fans. Listen, I've known Nick a long time, respect him. God only knows we've all given him his due as being, if not the greatest of all time, certainly the greatest of his generation. But how these coaches, and he's one of them, all right? Nick Saban is no different in my mind than Dabo Swinney or Jimbo Fisher or Ryan Day when they step in it. And he stepped in it. How could you possibly call last year a rebuilding year unless you're looking to excuse yourself for losing a game that you should not have lost? And that's exactly what happened. They beat Georgia by 3 touchdowns 3 weeks earlier, and they screwed it up. Didn't get the job done. Georgia earned it. They deserve to be national champions. But all Saban can talk about is his team's inexperience and its injuries. Yeah, they lost a wide receiver, a damn good one. But it's not like the players on the other side weren't banged up too. I mean, it's never ending. And the lapdog media in and around the Tuscaloosa area won't hold him accountable. You know, he went in yesterday, looking for a fight that the media was not willing to give him. There was one question about it, and then that was it. He was ready to go on a rant. No one was interested in offering up another question, I think because they were fearful of doing it. And then he just stormed off. And it's just so insular. It's like these guys are in silos, and they have no idea how little self-awareness they're proving to everyone they have. To say at this stage of his career, with all he's accomplished, and a Heisman Trophy quarterback that's returning for another year, that his club was rebuilding last year, stop. Just stop. Enough already.
Yeah, sometimes the silo they're in, like you said, is I'm surprised at Nick Saban. Of all the people, I mean, there are a lot of coaches that do that, but I was kind of surprised that he was up on that hill.
Well, here's the deal. He has preached to his fan base. All right, they really, the other team can never beat them. This is his psychological edge. Part of his process. He talks about the process all the time. Well, the psychological process, fellas, is this. We're too good to lose without losing it ourselves. The other team is not better than us. They're never better than us. You know, it's funny. At the end of the game, when he went out to meet Kirby Smart, I believe if you had the ability to read lips, he admitted to him as he shook his hand and embraced, well, you guys beat our blah, blah, blah in the fourth quarter. Okay? So with his colleague at the end of the game, he's willing to give him credit for the W. Months removed, however, well, we were without our best receiver. Another one got hurt in the middle of the game. And you know what? We lost an offensive guard that really stymied our run game too, and so excuses, okay, are made. And the fans all genuflect And the media there does too. Oh, yeah, well, of course they should have won the game. Georgia's the national champion in name only. We know who the better team really was. That's all part of his process.
Tim, there is continual talk, as you know, because of the future of college football, and it's been a month since USC and UCLA, and there's posturing going on or whatever else. Nothing seems to be imminent. Do you think there is anything when it comes to realignment or changes that's imminent?
Not now, but I will tell you that there could be some surprises between now and toe meeting leather. I think there's a very good chance that the Big Ten could do something before the start of the season. And if that does happen, it could trigger other movement. All right. And I think everyone's waiting with bated breath to see what Notre Dame is going to do with its rights with negotiations with NBC. And that might be, where this thing tilts. If Notre Dame feels like it can get the revenue that it wants from NBC, then they may well stay as an independent for the time being. They could easily do that. However, if maybe that doesn't go the way they want, then the potential is there that either one of two things could happen. Either they could join the Big Ten, or they could strike some sort of an arrangement with the Big Ten, similar to the one that they currently have with the ACC, where they're not really a conference member, but they guarantee that they'll play conference teams within the Big Ten, a minimum number of, say, 5, for instance. And, of course, as you know, they already play Michigan State. This year they play Ohio State. It wouldn't be a stretch for them to add 2 more games, okay, to become, quote unquote, in an arrangement with the Big Ten that could satisfy them, but not necessarily be a full-fledged member. Okay, maybe they could get some financial benefit from that. A potential of that being the case to go along with their NBC deal would be there. But I don't think anything will happen, to answer your question specifically, until after Notre Dame makes up its mind, whether it does or it doesn't. If it does, then I think there could be a huge chain reaction. And even if they don't, and the deal is done with NBC, that could dictate what happens with everybody else for the short term, which affects what's left of the Pac-12, what's left of the Big 12, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I think the potential for another trimmer, if you will, is there between now and the start of the season. If it doesn't happen by that time, then I think we'll see things stay the course at least through the regular season. And once we get to this upcoming silly season in 2023, maybe something else will happen as we get closer, because the Pac-12 has to get its deal done first, and the Big 12 comes later. Something to make me think about, fellas, as it relates to Big 12 versus Pac-12 is this. The Pac-12 really can't offer games at noon, okay? Isolated situations where they might do 1 game or 2 games at noon Eastern time, 9 Pacific, might be there on occasion, but very rarely. The Big 12, obviously, other than the Big 10, has more teams in the Central Time Zone, therefore would be much more comfortable playing games at noon, which could be an advantage for the Big 12 Conference as it relates to its time zone. They don't have the same market sizes that the Pac-12 has. That's the advantage that the Pac-12 has. But I think everything that could happen with that, fellas, that impacts either the Pac-12 or the Big 12, all centers around what happens with what's remaining to possibly happen in the Big 10.
Yep.
You have it up. It's there's the graphic, Garrett, if you would put it up again. Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Baylor 4, Utah 5, and Oklahoma, NC State, Notre Dame, Michigan, and Houston rounded out his top 10. Just outside Clemson, Ole Miss, USC, Oklahoma State, Kentucky, and also LSU. A lot of people in the chat room, Tim, love the fact that it's not that you're just fighting for the smaller guys, but that you are at least able to understand that they can play football too.
Well, you say fighting for the smaller guys. I don't think they're that much smaller at all. I think they're every bit as good, always have been as good. But unfortunately, we're dealing now in a college football media world that determines how much space in columns they're going to leave or how much television air they want to absorb conversation outside the brand name schools. This is all a byproduct of the godforsaken college football playoff, which has limited 130 teams at the Division I level from about 120 of them don't get any respect because all the media wants to write about or talk about are those brand names. And just because you're not a brand name doesn't mean you can't make something out of yourself. Look at the history of the sport. Look at where Boise State was before Boise State became what they are now. Look at what Clemson was before Dabo Swinney was able to create what he was able to in the Atlantic Coast Conference to make them a program that people had to pay attention to, even though they're in tiny Clemson, South Carolina. The one-time SEC wannabe was now beating Alabama to win a pair of national championships over a 6-year period. That's pretty amazing. So it can happen. Schools can come from places like Waco, Texas, and Raleigh, North Carolina, and Salt Lake City, Utah, and become a big boy. Just because of that factor, suddenly we think of them as being lesser than. Well, I guarantee you, when it comes to the players in the weight room, they don't believe they're lesser than anyone. So that's just a problem that we have in terms of the way the sport is covered by the national media, in my opinion.
Tim, thank you very much. Enjoy the grandkids. I know you're there to be able to do that, and good luck with your speech next week at the kickoff luncheon in Tyler as well.
You got it, and I look forward to seeing you guys when the season gets rolling. And remember, what this means to Baylor Bear fans, you're going to be in the playoffs. I'm also thinking that you're not going to be able to beat Ohio State, okay? But I'm saying you're going to get there, and you're going to win the Big 12 for the second consecutive year.
Thank you very much for your time, Tim Brando, Fox Sports with us. And by the way, on some of you who are saying that he's saying this because he's on a Baylor-centric radio station, he put it up on his Twitter feed with 130,000 followers. That doesn't mean he's the end-all. That doesn't mean he's going to be right. But he's not saying that because he's on a station in Waco, and he would change it for a station in Austin or change it for a station in Baton Rouge, would include LSU in there somewhere. It's on his feed with 130,000 people. And if he's wrong, I'm sure you will make sure you let him know.
We didn't have